In this episode on the growth concept, I feel is the most important episode I've done so far. In this episode, we'll be diving into the crucial conversation about mental health and strategies and ways to overcome this mental health challenge. With mental health becoming a big global concern these days, our guest Daniel will provide powerful insights and tools that you can use right now to start strengthening your mental health. Whether you're facing daily stress or dealing with a deeper mental health challenge, or you're just wondering how to be there for someone when someone comes to you with a mental health challenge, this episode is packed with the guidance you need to hear to help you transform your mindset. Hello and welcome back to another episode on the growth concept, hosted by myself, Keone Upton, where our mission is to inspire young individuals to discover their meaning, direction, and purpose by creating a community of growth and transformation all in one place. Did you know, according to the World Health Organization, nearly 1 in 5 young individuals experience mental health challenges? In fact, globally, 75% of mental health conditions begin by the age of 24, making it so crucial that we talk about it and talk about ways of managing it early. Whether it's anxiety, depression, or as simple as copping a bit of stress in everyday life, young individuals are facing mental health challenges at unpredictable rates, and this has to stop. That's why today's conversation is so important. That's enough from me. Let's get into it. Hello, Daniel, and welcome to the Growth Concept podcast. Thank you very much for coming on the show to offer your guidance and advice for young individuals that may be struggling a bit mentally, with mental health being such an important thing these days. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Keone. It's a real pleasure to be here.
So to kickstart this interview, Daniel, what is it that you do and why do you do it?
So I currently work as a client service manager for an NDIS organisation. I more or less sort of manage support workers who work with participants who have a neurodevelopmental disorder. That, for example, could be ADHD, autism, or an intellectual disability.
Yep.
And it also includes participants that have a psychosocial disability, primarily like schizophrenia. From my perspective, I've got a background in education psychology. My long-term goal is to become a registered psychologist.
Yeah, wow.
But I'm just figuring out, obviously, what field of psychology I want to go into. When I was younger, I was very much into sport. So I wanted to go in sport and performance psychology, but I found that's too narrow focused. When I started actually working with vulnerable people, it really opened my mind up to mental health, and I really took a lot of fulfillment in helping these sorts of people. So that opened my mind up to clinical, but now I'm looking to explore sort of community psychology, where really helping people out in the community and work towards their sort of towards their goals and ensuring that they're sort of empowered and living as independently as possible in the community. Why do I do it? Look, I mean, I think we've all obviously have our moments in life where we struggle with our mental health. You know, I personally find, I think, working with people with schizophrenia very fulfilling because it's an incredibly fascinating disorder. It really is. You know, it's for those that don't know, schizophrenia. The symptoms are primarily, delusions, hallucinations. Very much irrational thought patterns and behaviours, and very much disorganised speech as well. And it's a tricky one because it's not a physical disability; it's a psychosocial disability. Yeah. And I think really helping these people it's very rewarding. I think because I think when they're out in the community, they sometimes do look like regular people, but it's their mind that is very complex, and a lot of people that maybe don't have that knowledge in psychology would immediately judge them and things like that. And and I just find it really rewarding, just sort of understanding why they are the way they are. And I've had a good friend from personal experience who I grew up with at adolescence. Great guy, I mean, great intentions, but he unfortunately just took the wrong road in life. Engaged in substance use and risk-taking behaviours, and he was developing schizophrenia sort of symptoms. Wow. Schizoaffective disorder, I think he had.
That's amazing that you're in that industry and very rewarding, like you say. What is schizophrenia? Is it a mindset disorder, or do you mind giving us a bit of a rundown on what schizophrenia actually is?
Yes, so it is considered a psychosocial sort of disability.
What does that mean?
So it's a mental disorder, and usually how clinicians diagnose people with schizophrenia, they follow the DSM, so it's a Diagnostic Statistical Manual, and usually what a clinician would do, they'll assess a client coming in, and then they'll assess basically their mental health symptoms, and they'll assess whether they sort of meet criteria. And for something like schizophrenia, the common symptoms tend to be, like I said earlier, just delusions, so just delusional beliefs,
Yep.
Hallucinations, so thinking and seeing things that aren't always there, very much irrational thought patterns and behaviours as well. And yeah, just very complex. For example, for delusions, it could be someone who has these beliefs that they lived on Pluto one time, and that there's life there. And for example, there was someone who I worked with in the NDIS, and he was of the belief that he was going to transport to Pluto, and he had resentments towards Einstein because he believed that he stole his ideas in creating NASA or something.
Whoa, that must be so scary sometimes.
It is, but it's but I find it quite, being the helper of those sorts of people, it's good to have that curious mindset and just sort of understanding their beliefs and their minds and things like that. Yeah, it's fascinating sort of helping these sorts of people,
Yeah, wow, that's absolutely amazing, Daniel.
Yeah.
Was there a specific time that inspired you to take this path of mental health? Was there a change of perspective on the view of the industry? Do you mind sharing a time?
Yeah, I think when I reflect on my adolescence in school, I was never the sharpest kid at all. I wasn't that committed. I was always quite, I think, a bit lazy in the classroom. I seek, like a lot of, I think, youth, it's just you seek the approval of your friends, and I think you want to sort of get their approval. And when I reflect, I wish I was a bit more competent. But I was always sort of, I felt like I had an innate talent. I was always curious about just people and the complexities of the human mind. So obviously the standard path when you go to school, when you finish school, when you're part of a certain family, it's just, you go to university. It's just if that's the norms, what the hell do I want to study? I thought, psychology sounds interesting. So I thought, I'll study psychology. But I think with that, the beauty of psychology is that that teaches you to become a psychologist. It's important to know yourself if you have to help someone else. And I think, and I believe, obviously, mental health, it's very much a complex, broad topic. And I think it's not clear cut, and there's so many, I think, correlating factors in what influences mental health. But I think the beauty of it is that when I reflect on my adolescence, I don't think I necessarily suffered from severe stress and mental health to a severe degree, but I was someone who I think does struggle with anxiety,
yep.
And and low self-esteem, and I still struggle with those things today, without a doubt. But I think when and I don't know, it's when I was in school, it was that I felt in social, I've always felt like a bit of an outcast, I couldn't really connect with people around me, and I always felt I was sort of looked down upon. I never felt I was good at anything. And I think sometimes just helping these people for me, I felt quite, lonely and lack of self-worth. I didn't feel like I belonged. So I think helping these people that are in that state, and obviously I know this podcast is mainly for youth, and I do feel for youth that in that situation where they maybe feel quite isolated and have that low self-esteem. But even when they grow into adulthood and they're still dealing with that, I find it really rewarding, really helping them and really trying to empower them, because they're not alone in how they feel. They do have a lot of natural strengths, but they just need that support.
That's amazing, Daniel, especially with going through school with, there's that label on your head from day one, and that's somewhat your identity during school, and then you come out of school and then it's that kind of stays with you for a bit until you really have that mindset change, if you have that mindset change. So it's really good that you've found a way of escaping as such, and you've found purpose. With what you do, did you find that was your purpose calling straight out of school, or was it something during school? With getting into mental health, did you think, yes, this is for me? Or was it a bit after school then you realised that?
I think it was definitely after school. I think when I was on school, well, I think a lot of youth, I think when we're in school, we're still in that process of discovering our identity and our purpose. I think once you get into that early adulthood, you sort of find your feet a bit, you find yourself and you find what that purpose and what that calling is. So when I reflect on it, I more or less, I think, really struggled to find what that purpose is. But I think a key to mental health, a key to good mental health is really finding your purpose, trying to connect with your higher self, that desired self, and really being disciplined and trying to live in accordance with it and being committed and seeking mentors and good people to help kind of elevate yourself and empower yourself. And then once you feel that, I think you're working and striving towards that purpose and you're striving towards a state of self-actualization. You feel confident in your abilities, and then you're able to give. You become more of a giving person, and then you want to sort of give back to the community and help people that could be struggling. And I think that's the beauty of mental health, and sort of learning about the concept of, I think, psychology. I think once you feel competent in your abilities to help, it motivates you to be more compassionate in helping vulnerable people, So
that's absolutely amazing, Daniel. Well, hats off to you. That's incredible and inspiring, Daniel. That's amazing. So with obviously your work with dealing with mental health, what would be a few strategies, or what would be your process of overcoming that mental health challenge, in your opinion?
I think from a mental health concept, I mean, like I said, mental health is a very broad field, but if we break it down to a simple concept, we've got probably stress, depression, and anxiety. And how I categorise that is that when we're depressed, our mind is so ruminating on self-defeating facts about ourselves. And usually we're ruminating on the past, and symptoms is that lack of motivation. We feel helpless in who we are, and we're just not satisfied with who we are at all. I think anxiety and stress is when our mind is ruminating on and catastrophizing of worst case scenarios in the future. So I think really strategies to manage that is, one, start of awareness. I think identify with, I think when someone's struggling with their mental health, they've got to, I think, recognise what needs are not being unmet, and really try and identify, really sort of self-assess, I think, themselves to some degree.
Somewhat finding the why. Is there questions you ask yourself to really dig deep? Because obviously sometimes when you're in your thoughts, you don't know where to start. Is there specific questions as such someone should ask themselves?
Well, I think, and that's the thing, it's hard to think your way, I think, into solutions. I would always sort of advise someone to ask them questions, is to get it down on a paper or speak to someone about it. So I think I think you should always seek out social support, speak to someone who you feel you trust in your social network. And I think just speaking to someone is the most valuable thing. Unfortunately, for a lot of people, they might not have the most stable social network. If that's the case, always seek professional help. Yep. I think you should, even if you do feel like you've got the social network, always seek professional help, because you have people trained in the field that have developed their sort of communication skills, to help you work through a problem. So always seek out professional help without a doubt. And once you feel you've established a good relationship with, say if you've been referred to a therapist after seeing your GP, it's very important that you feel you trust that therapist. Progress is not made in therapy until you've basically built that therapeutic alliance with the therapist. So it's important that the relationship's there, and that's where progress is made, and then you can work out the solutions to basically your problem with that therapist. Other strategies as well, it's very important to practice self-care. So diet, simple things, just diet, exercise, ensuring you've got good sleep, and having a good routine from there. And obviously, I think grounding practices are crucial as well. The importance of meditation and mindfulness is very crucial, because I think they help develop self-awareness and present moment awareness, and you don't identify with your thoughts as much. Yeah. As well, and if someone's of religious faith, I think prayer is crucial as well, because that teaches you to be, I think, grateful. And it teaches, enforces rituals to be grateful as well, and I think keeps you connected to something larger than life. So Yeah.
Do you find that self-reflection and gratitude helps?
Absolutely. And I think in a mental health context, it is crucial, because I think, like, if we go back to, I think, the broad concepts of mental health, stress, depression and anxiety, when that mind is ruminating away, it's in a habitual pattern, and it's hard to sometimes break that pattern. And I think when you think, if you do a simple practice, such as think of 3 to 5 things you're grateful for and then write it down, it at least breaks that cognitive cycle of that mind ticking away of negative things. And I think if you establish a routine where you know, for example, if you wake up in the morning, you write down 5 things you're grateful for. It's a routine, because you maybe had a bad sleep or something like that, and you don't want to start off the day. I was like, oh God, I only slept 3 hours. I had a terrible, and then your mind catastrophize. Oh, I had a terrible night at work. I'm now going to go to work. Oh, God, I hate it. Now I hate my boss. And it's like, when you at least think of 5 things you're grateful for, it stops your mind from spiraling into that pattern, you know. So,
yeah, that's a very good point. Very valid.
So gratitude is crucial.
Definitely. You were saying earlier that you had some anxiety and depression in the past, and that may be something reoccurring. Mm-hmm. What are a few ways that you deal with it, and what are your ways of escaping as such?
Yeah, I think for me, I think when I reflect on my mental health, it is more, I think I've struggled from an anxiety concept. I like to think when I go into a state of depression, I mean, I'm fortunate enough that I haven't really been in a state where it's been prolonged. It's been 1 or 2 days where you feel like absolute crap, and you're just like, I do not like feeling this way. We've got to do something about this. But I think I've struggled more with anxiety, more on a social concept, because I think I'm introverted by nature, and I still do. And sometimes I feel like I play to my introversion a bit too much.
What's that?
So just I think, because obviously it's a personality trait. So you've got introversion and extroversion. And I think people who are more sort of extroverted, I think socialising is a bit more natural to them, and they feel empowered by social situations. I think people who are more introverted, they're more comfortable being alone, and they might struggle to socialise a bit more. And I think if you correlate that sort of trait with trait and having high anxiety, it can be difficult to socialise a bit. It can take a bit of effort. And I think when I reflect, if we go back to when I personally reflect on in school, I was very very much high social anxiety. I think I always I was quite insecure of my masculinity as a young male, and I think I was always jealous and envious of blokes that were very comfortable with who they were in a masculine trait. In showing their sort of masculine side. And I was very much sort of driven by envy. And when I sort of was speaking to these people, I was sort of intimidated by. I was very sort of anxious, and in school, I was just always very anxious. So,
for me, I've not suffered anxiety that I'm aware of. Mm-hmm. Do you mind explaining to me what this may feel like, or some symptoms of anxiety?
I think its symptoms is so. From a sort of social anxiety concept. Say if you're going into a social setting, saying you're going to a party and you barely know anyone, I think your mind, firstly you've got the physical symptoms, so you're tense, your muscles tense up a bit, your heart might beating fast, you might start sweating, but then you start catastrophe, when you sort of envision the event in the future, such as going to a social event where you don't know anyone, your mind's just catastrophizing on the worst case scenario sort of thing, and you're thinking, and your mind's thinking, what if I say this? What if I do this? You're just thinking of all the negatives and things like that. And I think in these sort of social situations where you maybe are talking to someone, you're just not always comfortable in the setting. You feel those physical symptoms of the muscles tensing, the heart pumping, and your palms sweating. You're not comfortable in that situation, and you're tense, and you don't want to talk to anyone. You just want to kind of go into your little shell and avoid. I mean, that's how I'll personally sort of categorise sort of anxiety.
Yeah, for sure. Is there a way of dealing with it when you have it on the spot? I imagine being in a social setting and all of a sudden having this feeling. What can I do in the moment to kind of minimise the amount of stress or anxiety I'm feeling? Or is it completely based, deep breaths, taking a minute to reflect?
I think in the moments where you feel quite a lot of, if you're in a setting where you feel quite a lot of social anxiety, I think exposure's important. So just sort of, if you have, say, a young person who maybe, is scared of speaking to women. I think really just the treatment for that is go out there and speak to women. Go out there and speak to as many women as you can. You probably will look a bit stupid, but like simply just getting the exposure and the reps in will naturally ease the anxiety. Because for example, if you have a young person that maybe wants to speak to women, you might go up and he's going to be very anxious and things like that. And you might say the wrong things and say, oh, of course, but just getting the reps in, I think, definitely help.
Just really facing it.
So just really sort of facing your fears. I think in the setting, I think where you do feel sort of anxious in a sort of social environment, I think it's just awareness of how you're feeling in the moment, and being kind to yourself, and
not being too harsh.
And you've got some people that really thrive, I think, in social environments, but you've got other people that don't so much. They prefer, I think, maybe going into social environments is very challenging for them. So I think just sort of being kind to yourself and self-compassionate. And I think in the moment, say if you're in a party and you do feel sort of socially anxious, I think just I would say just know yourself. Just be kind to yourself. Look, it's just like maybe you got a young person that's going to a party, hasn't gone to a lot of parties.
Just remind yourself, what am I grateful for?
Yeah,
to get kind of out of that loop.
And just be kind to the fact that you've made the effort to go there, and like I said, if you feel anxious in a social setting, just take a moment, maybe go somewhere for yourself, and just focus on your breathing, do some deep relaxation breathing, such as 4-7-8 breathing or box breathing to slow your nervous system down, and then go out and have another go in a social setting.
I hear around in the media that this mental toughness is thrown around a fair bit.
Yeah.
What would you say are some ways an individual can make themselves somewhat mentally tougher to face those challenges?
I think from a young person's perspective, I think from a young male's perspective, I think resilience and toughness is a crucial masculine trait. I find, obviously, when we say that we're faced with challenges, look, I think from a young person's perspective in dealing with sort of challenges, it's very important to have ambition and direction of where you're going.
Yep.
And how I think when we look at challenges, a key concept of viewing it is how we respond to those particular challenges. So say if we are faced with an obstacle, and a young person is faced with an obstacle, look, if they have ambitions of where they want to go and who they want to be, and if that obstacle, if it's an obstacle that's sort of in the way of their path, then that obstacle sort of becomes the way.
Somewhat having that direction on where you want to go. For someone who doesn't have that direction, for example, if I have no idea where I want to be, let's just say in a month, I have no idea where I want to be in a year, and I'm hit with a big challenge, whether it's a family member passes away and I have to deal with that, but I don't know where I want to be. In your opinion, would be an ideal way to go about that situation? Would it be, you were saying to seek that help if needed, which is a very good point, but if I'm alone, how do I go about that? Because I imagine it'd be super scary making that first move to be like, I gotta seek help.
Yeah, and I think that's hard. I think for youth that are in that situation where they feel they don't have a lot of direction and that they're having issues within their family, I think that's it is incredibly, I think, vulnerable states to be in. Look, I think having awareness, I think, of your social network is crucial. If you feel you have a trusted friend, I would advise, I think, speaking to them. Unfortunately, there is, I think it's a lot of youth out there that maybe do feel quite lonely and maybe feel they are surrounded by antisocial peers.
What would be your guidance if someone, let's just say, you finish school and you drift away from some mates, get close to some mates, people come and go. If you are having that struggling time to find your next group of people and you really have no one to count on, you have parents, but what should I do in that situation? What would your guidance be? If someone came to you and be like, look, I'm struggling with this, what should I do? I have no one to talk to.
I mean, the beauty of, I think, those situations, we always have the emotional helplines.
Yep.
If you're in a severe state of distress, you can always contact, the Samaritans, the Beyond Blues, and for a men's line as well as if unfortunately if you are feeling suicidal, you can always contact Lifeline as well if you're in a crisis situation. I think in those situations as well, it is if you have sort of a youth that's in a situation where, you know, there's issues in the family, there's not a lot of direction of where they're going after they finish school, I think just identify what your needs are, and try and seek out, I think, help. Identify with what your problem is, and I think try and seek out the right sort of professional to help you
around that.
Yeah, I mean, for example, like what I think the person's got to ask themselves is what are they most sort of impacted by? Are they in a state of existential crisis because they don't know where they're going to go in their career? If that's the case, then they've got to maybe speak to a career counsellor. There's a situation where a family member's passed away and they're dealing with the grief of that. I'd recommend, you know, speaking to a counsellor or a grief counsellor or something like that. If they're feeling, you know, particularly if they're feeling lonely and don't have a lot of friends, maybe just inquire of what their interests are and find out social and research on social groups that aligns with their interests and their hobbies and things like that. So really, I think just sort of a key thing is with that situation is just really identify with what your specific needs are and what the problem is, and just seek out the right mentors and professionals as best you can to ensure that you can really get yourself out of a run, because it's important that these people, you know, we always can't do this stuff alone, and we need the right support. So I think just seeking out the right professionals and mentors is a crucial one as well.
That's a very good point, Daniel. Moving on to, obviously, being in and around social situations, people have different mindsets, different ways of going about things.
Yeah.
If someone comes to me with a mental health problem and I haven't been in a situation like that before, what would be one of a few ways to go about with being there for someone? Would there be a particular approach or strategy to ease that tense situation?
I think, like, in a situation, if a friend is coming to you and they're expressing a mental health concern that they're having, I think that's an incredibly rewarding thing for yourself, because that shows that person trusts you. So I think as a friend, you should really appreciate that they've come and opened up to you, because they think that you're a good person and they trust you. And I think you should sort of, I think, empower that in them. It's really appreciate them, I think, in opening up. In a situation where someone's sort of expressing their mental health, I think we do have a tendency to immediately try and fix. We immediately try and find solutions. The best thing to do is sometimes just to listen. You know, I think as humans, we have a need to feel understood, and the best thing to do is listen. And I think an ability to listen is a hard skill, because a lot of the time when people are talking, our mind's thinking of things.
I just want to say this.
I know, exactly. And your mind's too busy looking at that internal and listening to that internal monologue instead of actually listening.
I've been guilty.
Yeah, we all have been, Kiani, you know. So, and look, and I think the beauty, I think anyone could benefit from any form of counselling experience, because it really teaches you the importance of listening. And as a listener, look, there's the one of the founding fathers of humanistic psychology, Carl Rogers. He said that the three pillars of counselling, or the three core foundations of counselling, was empathy. So seeing someone from someone else's perspective and really trying to feel their emotions. Congruence, so as a listener, being your own authentic self, being genuine, not putting on a facade or doing things by text.
What's a facade?
So a facade is just being someone who you're not.
Yeah,
sort of thing. And I think when someone's when you can tell when someone's a bit fake when they're speaking to you. And I think if someone's expressing a mental health concern, you can tell when someone's being a bit ingenuine. So it's really just sort of as a helper, just being your own genuine self. Yep. And then unconditional positive regard. So fully accepting that person as they are. Not judging them, and not immediately jumping to conclusions there, just fully listening. So with those sort of pillars, just fully sort of listen, and really try and understand their problem. Be curious, ask open-ended questions. Just say, you know...
What would be a couple of examples of the open-ended questions?
Well, it's just like, you know, if someone's sort of expressing, you know, concerns about their mental health, just asking the why, the who, what, why, when, and how. So... how did that make you feel? So expressing the feelings. I mean, if someone's sort of communicating a problem, I mean,
even like help me understand. Like even simply saying that, I feel that could have a good effect on the way you understand, because you're asking them to explain.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, for example, if you've got a youth who's like in a crisis situation, and like, you know, a family member's passed away and they maybe don't have a lot of friends. It's just asking them the open-ended questions. I mean, like, how do you feel when you're in a real distressed state? What have you done? it's just asking those simple questions there, and also sort of, I think, reflecting statements as well. So, if someone says a statement such as, "Oh, I'm such a failure, I failed all my exams," as a listener, you can simply just reply, "You're such a failure because you failed all your exams." So just repeating that thing back to them allows them to sort of opt and open up a bit more. And also just doing prompts. So when someone says something, "Oh, life sucks," sometimes just sitting in silence and just saying, "Okay, go on." And sitting in that silence, it's not always comfortable, but it allows that person to open up a bit more and feel that void definitely. A bit more. So little prompts there, and then just summarising as well. Ensuring that we've sort of heard them correctly. So when someone sort of expressed their mental health concern, we could have, say, a situation where a young male, his girlfriend's cheated on him, and he put a lot of attachment towards his relationship, and he's in a real state of despair, and he's just vented this one to you. So as a listener, we could say you feel incredibly depressed because your long trusted girlfriend has unfortunately gone with someone else, and that must be really hard.
That's a form of understanding and making sure that they have been heard.
Yeah.
That's a very good point, Daniel.
Yeah.
I got one last question for you, Daniel. If you could go back to your younger self, with the knowledge you have now, what would you tell your younger self?
I think how I'd speak to my younger self is have some ambition, have some direction of where you want to go. I think when I reflect on my adolescence, there wasn't a lot of direction, and there wasn't a lot of ambition of where I wanted to go. And I think in those situations, you kind of just attach yourselves. You find attachments to unhealthy sort of behaviours and things like that, I find at that young age. But I think when you have a direction and ambition of where you want to go, it teaches you a bit of self-discipline, and you find that core purpose that's authentic to you. So if I was to say to my younger self, I would say, "Daniel, stop playing so much of the blooming games so much. Get outside, have some fun, socialise, but have some direction and ambition of what you want to be and who you want to be." Yeah,
definitely. Well, thank you so much, Daniel, for your time for this podcast. I'm sure with mental health being such a hit topic these days, and a lot of people are suffering from it, and having that someone to talk to can make that big difference. And it's amazing that you're in this field to offer that support and guidance for individuals that are having that tough time during their life. Do you have any resources where young individuals can go to find a way to help understand their concern? Do you have any resources around that, whether it's socials or a community?
Well, firstly, I think for any youth that are sort of struggling with their mental health, I think you can always go to the emotional helplines as well, like the Beyond Blues, the Samaritans, and things like that. I think for youth as well, I mean, personally, I always found the self-help books always helpful. So just finding resources that are authentic to you and that you can learn from. And I think being inspired by, I think, people, by people in your life is crucial as well. In terms of, I think, youth groups, there's a lot out there. From my understanding, I think in Perth there's the Youth Futures as well.
Youth Futures.
I think there's Youth Focus as well, and you have a lot of workers there that do, I think, where they do a lot of work to I think help troubled youth, and I think they sort of mentor them to, I guess, live more sort of pro-social and proactive lives. You've also got, I think, the RISE organisation as well. RISE organisation, yep. That they have sort of mentors in there, and I think they tend to go into schools, and they help kids to live sort of more social and more pro-social sort of lives, and help with any mental health concerns there. So I think engaging in these sorts of youth groups in your community is certainly valuable as well. And there's many angels that are part of these organisations, and I would always, I think, encourage any youth to, I think, get on board with them, because you can learn a lot from them.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Daniel. I really appreciate you coming on this show to offer your wisdom and guidance for individuals out there. Thank you very much, Daniel.
Thanks so much, Keanu. Appreciate it.
That brings us to the end of this episode. I'm so thankful for Daniel for coming on this show and sharing his guidance and wisdom about the topic of mental health, with it being so important these days. Thank you. If you want to help make a difference to those suffering in the world, join Daniel on an extraordinary journey to make a real difference. From this year, September 2024 to May 18th, 2025, Daniel will be pushing his limits in a series of challenging triathlons and running events. all to support the life-saving charity Red Cross and World Vision. Every stride, every race is a step towards providing the emergency aid eradicating world hunger. Your kind donations will go directly to these charities and will go to the people that need it most. Together, we can help change the lives of others. If you want to reach Daniel more on a personal note, see the link to Daniel's charity and his socials in the show notes. I really hope you've gotten something out of this episode, whether it was a tactic of a way of coping with the stress, or as simple as knowing how to be there for someone when they come to you with a concern. If this episode has brought value to you, please share it with someone so they can learn as well. Let's spread the word, and if you're in need of assistance, please reach out to Lifeline or Kids Helpline, as well as Mental Health Crisis Assessment and Treatment Team and Beyond Blue. All these communities are just one phone call away, and they're here to help. Follow this channel so you can stay updated with the latest insights and guests to help you reach your full potential. I also invite you to leave a review on how you thought this episode went and how we can improve for future episodes, as well as what guests you would like to hear on this podcast. Until next time, keep growing. Everything said in this podcast episode is only for general advice only. We do not know your circumstances. If you are in need of assistance, please call one of the references I listed earlier. Please, it's one phone call away. It's never too late. Thank you.